The morning rush at Weston and Price Interiors was in full swing. Phones rang nonstop. Assistants darted between cubicles, and the air smelled of expensive coffee and tension. The firm specialized in luxury design, glass, marble, ego. And at the center of it all was Michael Weston, the managing director, who prided himself on being sharp, efficient, and uncompromising. Michael's motto was simple: time is money, and people are replaceable. He walked through the showroom like a king inspecting his court, barking orders about late shipments and overdue invoices. Every surface gleamed, every employee stood a little straighter when he passed. He liked it that way. So when a delivery man showed up late, sweaty from the summer heat, carrying boxes for one of their most important clients, Michael's patience snapped. "Hey," he barked, "you're 40 minutes late. Do you have any idea how much that delay costs me?" The man set down the boxes slowly. He was tall, lean, dressed in a simple uniform with a small logo on the chest. His skin glistened from the heat, and a polite but tired smile tugged at his lips. "Sorry, sir. The highway was backed up, and the dispatcher sent me to the wrong address first. I got here as fast as I could." Michael folded his arms. "Yeah, sure. That's what they all say. I have the paperwork right here." Michael snatched it out of his hand. "Don't talk back to me. Do you even know who this delivery's for? This isn't some cheap furniture store. This is Weston and Price. We deal with people who expect quality, not excuses." The man's expression stayed calm, but something in his eyes changed, a flicker of quiet restraint. "I understand, sir. I'll unload them right away." "See that you do," Michael snapped, "and try not to scratch the flooring this time." The workers nearby shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances, but no one dared say a word. Michael's temper was famous and feared. The delivery man said nothing more. He simply bent down, lifted the first heavy box with ease, and began stacking them neatly in the designated area. Every movement was careful, deliberate, precise. When he was done, he signed the paperwork, thanked the receptionist, and left without another word. Michael barely noticed. He was already back on his phone, complaining to his assistant. "If that's the kind of service we're getting from suppliers these days, maybe we should find someone who actually trains their drivers." An hour later, his assistant hurried into his office, pale. "Sir, you might want to see this. Mr. Price just arrived, and he's brought his son." Michael frowned. "Fine. Send them in. Maybe the kid will learn how real business works." The door opened, and in walked Daniel Price, one of the firm's major investors. Polished, confident, silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Beside him stood the same man from earlier, the delivery man. Michael's jaw went slack. "Mr. Weston," Daniel said pleasantly, "this is my son, Evan Price. He wanted to surprise me by stopping by before his meeting with the logistics company. I believe he just made a delivery here." Evan smiled, the same calm, polite smile as before. "Nice to see you again, sir." Michael's stomach dropped. His face flushed red. I didn't realize—" Evan chuckled softly. "No, I don't imagine you did." Daniel looked between them, eyes narrowing slightly. "Something wrong?" Michael forced a shaky laugh. "No, no, of course not. Just small misunderstanding." But Evan's gaze lingered on him, steady and unreadable. "I'm sure it happens all the time." For the first time that day, Michael Weston, the man who prided himself on control, felt something he hadn't in years: shame. And it wouldn't be the last time that afternoon that he'd have to face it, because soon, the man he'd dismissed as just a delivery driver would be sitting across from him in the conference room, not as an employee, but as the newest stakeholder in the company he thought he owned. Michael Weston had been in hundreds of meetings, tense, competitive, high stakes, but none had ever made him sweat like this one. He sat at the long glass table in the boardroom, staring at the door, trying to hide his discomfort. His reflection in the glossy surface looked composed, crisp suit, calm posture, but his pulse told another story. Across from him sat Daniel Price, the firm's senior investor, flipping through a folder of documents. Beside him, looking utterly at ease, sat his son Evan, the man Michael had just humiliated an hour earlier. The delivery man. Evan was dressed simply now in a clean button-down and slacks, but there was an undeniable confidence in the way he carried himself. No trace of anger, no trace of arrogance. Just quiet poise. Daniel looked up. All right, gentlemen, let's get started. As I mentioned, Evan will be joining us as part of the Logistics Review Committee. He's been handling some supply chain analysis for my investment group, and I think his insights could help us streamline costs. Michael's throat went dry. Yes, of course. Welcome, Mr. Price. Evan smiled politely. Thank you, and please. Just Evan. No need for formalities. Michael forced a laugh, hoping it didn't sound as nervous as it felt. Right, Evan. Well, glad to have you on board. The meeting began. Spreadsheets appeared on the projector. Numbers scrolled across the screen. But Michael barely heard a word. He kept sneaking glances at Evan, who, it turned out, was brilliant. He spoke clearly, confidently, dissecting logistics data like he'd been doing it for years. Every observation was sharp but constructive. He didn't boast, didn't grandstand. He just knew his stuff. At one point, Daniel nodded proudly. Evan has a degree in business logistics and sustainable transport. He's been working directly with several distribution partners. Knows what it's like on the ground, too. Michael nearly choked on his water. On the ground. The words hit like a punch. He realized what that meant. Evan had chosen to do those deliveries himself, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand the work. Evan caught his eye briefly. The look wasn't smug or gloating. It was worse. It was kind. And for Michael, that kindness stung more than any revenge could have. When the meeting ended, Daniel excused himself to take a call, leaving the two men alone in the room. Michael stood awkwardly, pretending to tidy some papers. Evan, listen. About earlier? Evan raised a hand gently. It's all right. You don't have to explain. Michael hesitated. I do, actually. I was out of line. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I thought that I was just a delivery guy, Evan finished for him, his tone calm. Someone beneath your attention. Michael winced. Yes. Evan nodded slowly. You know, I've done this before. Worked the routes, made deliveries, fixed my own van when it broke down in the rain. People treat you differently when they think you have nothing they want. It's educational. Michael swallowed hard. I suppose I've built this company to expect perfection. I don't tolerate excuses. Evan smiled faintly. Then maybe you've forgotten that people aren't machines. Sometimes, a good leader makes room for grace. That word, grace, hit deeper than Michael wanted to admit. He looked at Evan, searching for some hint of anger, some small satisfaction in seeing him uncomfortable. But there was none. Just understanding. I really am sorry, Michael said quietly. Not because of who you are, but because I was wrong. Evan nodded. Then we're fine. I'm not here to humiliate you, Mr. Weston. I'm here to help make this place better. That includes the people who work under you. All of them. Michael exhaled slowly. You remind me of your father, Evan chuckled. He says I'm too idealistic. Maybe that's what we need more of around here, Michael said. Later that afternoon, after Evan and Daniel left, Michael stood alone in the showroom. He watched as another delivery truck pulled up. Same company, different driver. For the first time, he walked outside himself, helped unload a few boxes, and said thank you. The young driver looked shocked. Inside, Michael paused by the lobby mirror, staring at his reflection. The man staring back wasn't the same as that morning. Something had shifted, a crack in the armor of arrogance. And as he turned to head back upstairs, one quiet thought echoed in his mind. Maybe real leadership isn't about control. Maybe it's about respect. The next morning, the atmosphere at Weston and Price Interiors was different, though most employees couldn't quite say why. Maybe it was the way Michael Weston moved through the halls. The sharpness in his tone was gone, replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. He greeted people by name. He said please. Some thought he was sick. Others thought he'd finally been humbled by Mr. Price. The truth was simpler and far more profound. Evan Price had scheduled a follow-up meeting for that morning, one focused not on numbers, but on people. The staff filed into the conference room with quiet curiosity. Even Michael's assistant, Mara, whispered to a colleague, "He never holds meetings like this. Ever." When everyone settled, Evan stood at the front of the room, casual as ever, hands in his pockets. "Thanks for being here. I want to talk about the part of business most companies ignore, the human part." He turned to Michael. "Mr. Weston, you mind if I ask a question?" Michael straightened his tie. "Go ahead. When was the last time you spoke to one of your delivery teams?" The room fell silent. Michael hesitated. "Personally, I don't usually handle that level of communication. That's what our supply manager's for." Evan nodded slowly. "Right. But they represent your company, don't they? They wear your logo, handle your clients' products, build your reputation every day. Yet they're the ones who usually get blamed when something goes wrong." Michael said nothing. The truth of it stung. Evan looked around the table. "When I worked those routes, I saw how small kindnesses made a huge difference. A driver who's treated like a partner, not a problem, will go the extra mile. Literally. A receptionist who feels respected will stay late without being asked. A manager who listens instead of lectures earns loyalty, not fear." He paused, meeting Michael's eyes. "Respect isn't charity. It's strategy." Murmurs rippled around the table. People nodded, quietly impressed. Michael leaned back, thoughtful. "So, what would you suggest?" Evan smiled. "Start by listening. Create space for everyone to be heard. The drivers, the warehouse workers, the assistants. Ask what makes their jobs harder, what could make them better. Then act on it. Not because it looks good on paper, but because it's the right thing to do." Michael nodded slowly. "And if they don't believe I've changed?" "Then you prove it," Evan said simply. "One small act at a time." That afternoon, Michael did something no one expected. He called an all-staff meeting in the lobby. Everyone from interns to warehouse supervisors to cleaning staff. The kind of gathering that hadn't happened since the company's founding. When everyone had assembled, he stepped up to the small platform at the front. "I owe some of you an apology," he began. "I've run this company with the wrong idea of leadership. I thought fear created results. I thought being the loudest voice made me right. But yesterday I learned that respect, not control, builds real success." The room was completely still. He continued, voice steady. "From now on, Weston and Price is changing how we work. Starting today, we're creating an open forum for all employees, every position, every department. We'll listen and we'll improve together." He took a breath. "I can't undo the way I've treated some of you in the past, but I can promise to do better, and I will." At first, no one moved. Then Mara, his assistant, started clapping softly. Others joined. Within seconds, the room filled with applause. Cautious at first, then genuine. Evan watched from the back of the crowd, arms folded, a faint smile on his face. He didn't step forward, didn't steal attention. This was Michael's moment, and he'd earned it. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Michael found Evan by the entrance. "You set me up, didn't you?" he said with a half smile. Evan chuckled. "I gave you a chance. You took it." "I'll admit it felt good. Better than I thought," Michael said. "For the first time, I think people actually respected me." "They probably did before," Evan replied. "They just didn't have a reason to show it." Michael nodded, humbled. "You know, I used to think leadership was about commanding a room. Turns out it's about earning one." "Now you're starting to sound like my dad," Evan teased. Michael laughed quietly. "That might not be such a bad thing." Evan smiled. "No, it's not." That evening, as the office lights dimmed, Michael stood alone in the showroom. For years, the space had felt cold, clinical, a place built on numbers and ego. But tonight, it felt alive again. He could still hear the faint echoes of applause, and for the first time in his career, Michael Weston didn't feel like a boss. He felt like a leader. A few weeks passed, and life at Weston and Price Interiors began to change in ways no one could have predicted. The office felt lighter, warmer, like someone had opened a window that had been shut for years. Employees smiled when they passed each other in the hall. People stayed after hours, not out of fear, but because they wanted to. Even clients started to notice the difference, a kind of renewed energy that no branding or PR campaign could fake. And at the center of it all was Michael Weston, a man transformed. He'd gone from shouting to listening, from demanding to asking. He still led firmly, but now he led with empathy. The arrogance that once filled every corner of the room had been replaced by something far more powerful: humility. Yet even as things improved, one mystery remained: Evan Price. Michael had seen him around often since that first meeting. They'd talked business, exchanged ideas, even grabbed lunch once. But there was something about Evan, a quietness behind his confidence, a maturity that went beyond his age. He didn't act like a typical investor's son. He worked, he listened, and most of all, he cared. One Friday morning, Michael walked into his office to find a thick folder on his desk. His name was written neatly across the top in Daniel Price's handwriting. Inside was a letter. Michael, before you head into the next board meeting, I think there's something you should know about my son. The truth is, Evan isn't just helping with logistics or operations. He's been handling much more, quietly, behind the scenes. When the company was struggling last year, it was Evan who stepped in. He used part of his own investment portfolio to stabilize our accounts and renegotiate the contracts that kept Weston and Price alive. He asked me not to tell anyone because he wanted to see what kind of leader you'd become without knowing who had saved your company. Now, I think it's time you did. Daniel Price. Michael froze. He reread the letter twice, heart pounding harder each time. Evan saved the company? He leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the skyline he might have lost, if not for the very man he had once humiliated. It was a revelation that hit harder than any boardroom defeat. Evan hadn't just been teaching him humility, he had earned the right to. That afternoon, Michael requested an emergency all-hands meeting. No one knew why, but by 2 p.m., the entire staff had gathered in the lobby again. Evan arrived a few minutes late, looking confused. "You called everyone?" he asked quietly. Michael smiled faintly. "Yes. And this time, I'm not the one who will be doing the talking." He turned to the crowd. "Everyone, before we begin, there's someone among us who deserves recognition. Someone who reminded this company what leadership really means." Evan blinked, realizing too late what was happening. Michael continued, his voice clear and proud. "A few months ago, Weston and Price was struggling, and I was too proud to admit it. But one person saw beyond the numbers. He stepped in, not for fame or credit, but because he believed in what we could become." He gestured toward Evan. "That man is Evan Price." The room erupted in whispers. Evan looked stunned. "Michael, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Michael interrupted firmly, "because I owe you more than an apology. I owe you this company's second chance." He stepped aside, allowing the applause to begin, a long, thunderous wave that filled the entire lobby. Evan looked around overwhelmed, shaking his head modestly. When the noise died down, he finally spoke. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "A company isn't built by one person's generosity or another's title. It's built by people who learn, grow, and change. Michael taught me something too, that it's never too late to lead with compassion." Michael smiled, and Evan reminded me that real strength comes from grace, not pride. Later that evening, as the building emptied and the lights dimmed, Michael stood in the quiet of his office. On his desk sat two things: the letter from Daniel Price and a small brass nameplate Evan had left behind. It read, "Evan Price, partner, Weston and Price." Michael smiled softly, setting it in the center of his desk. He looked out over the glowing city skyline, the same one that had once represented success and status, but now meant something far more profound. It wasn't about being on top. It was about lifting others up. And for the first time, he felt what every great leader should: not pride, but gratitude.